Welcome to Cast of Creators. We're your hosts. I'm Nelson Thal.
And I'm Casey Stewart. We spent our careers in media and publishing, and now we're setting the stage for creative people who inspire us to share their stories.
Our guest today is film director and producer Allan Ungar. His latest movie, Bandit, comes out September 23rd and stars Josh Duhamel, Alicia Cuthbert, and Mel Gibson.
We talked about Allan's career as a filmmaker, behind the scenes of making Bandit, and his latest film with Nicolas Cage. Let's go.
Allan, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's wonderful to have you here.
We'll see about that after.
Well, we were fortunate enough to watch an advanced screening of Bandit, your film, and it was fantastic. We both loved it. I mean,
yes,
Case
I
called
watched
me over
it
the
this
weekend.
weekend.
Who paid you to say that?
Nobody. No, it was good. I even
You mean
took
how
some.
much did they pay?
Yeah.
I took some notes. I have a couple favorite scene. Yeah, I think it was good.
Oh, awesome.
And
Glad
it comes
you guys
out
enjoyed it.
September 23rd.
Yeah.
Awesome. It's very exciting.
What was your initial, what made you choose this movie? Did you read the book? I mean, how did it all sort of get started?
I hadn't read the book. So just to go back, so Craig Wenman, who's the writer, he had sort of heard these rumors, like urban legend about this unstoppable bank robber when he was growing up in the 80s in Ottawa.
Okay.
So he then becomes a successful writer, and he's like, I want to go back and figure this out. So he finds out that the book got published in 96. He finds out it was a real story, in fact, and he contacts the publisher. He gets access to Robert Knuckle, who was the author who passed away a couple of years ago.
Okay.
And he introduces him to the real Gilbert Galvan because he's such a friendly Canadian bank robber, he stayed in touch with the author who profiled him as well as the
Yes,
detective
okay, because
who caught
I
him.
wondered about this. 'Cause
hilarious.
Yeah.
I did a little bit of research, and I was like, okay, he's still around. He's not in jail anymore.
Yeah.
So he kept in touch with him. Okay.
So he everybody had access to this guy, and I think that's what he wanted, right? Like everybody, he did it for the fame. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
So Craig got a hold of the life rights to Gilbert, the book rights. He wrote it on spec completely, so he wasn't hired to do it. He kind of just went on his own, developed it. And then my agent, who was at the same agency, sent me the script. And I read it, and I loved it because I was like, it's a compelling story, great characters. Some of it's like stranger than fiction moments. But Canadian was the biggest hook for me. And so as someone who grew up in Canada, lives in Canada, has been making movies in Canada, it's really frustrating that people always come here and it's like, oh, we're going to make it set in New York, but we're going to double it here. And or it's Atlanta, like all these cities. No one ever does Canada for Canada.
Yeah.
So I was really stoked about that. So of course we went and made it in Georgia. So I read it. I loved it. Craig and I sat down. We developed it for a couple of years. We set it up with a producer in Montreal, Gold Rush Entertainment, who pretty much shepherded the whole thing from start to finish.
Wow.
Harold Greenberg Fund supported sort of the script development, and we spent, I'd say 2 or 3 years before we got Josh on board, and then it kind of kickstarted things as the pandemic started.
Yeah.
Right,
What was
right at the
that
gate.
like? Because you had planned to shoot in Toronto and Vancouver.
Yeah.
And that didn't happen.
No bueno. Well, so we had sort of set this up for a while, knowing that it was really important to shoot on location here with the support of like Telefilm and the sort of typical subsidies that you get from Ontario, the federal level, the provincial level. And then COVID hits. And so Josh signs on. We're not sure when we're going to do it. We're not even sure where we're going to do it. We're sort of at a standstill at this point. And this is I'd say this is like April 2020.
Oh.
So
Wow.
Josh goes off to do the Jennifer Lopez movie Shotgun Wedding. He's got a couple other things. I think he's finishing Jupiter's Legacy at this point. Yeah. So he's actually in Toronto finishing Jupiter's Legacy. And I get a call that because of the new mandates, any actor flying in has to quarantine for 14 days in a hotel. So if you're Mel Gibson and you're working 5 days, let's say, or a week, you're basically going to sit in quarantine more than the time you're actually working.
Right.
Which isn't a great sell for anybody who wants to work in general.
No.
So that was a big problem. And then Telefilm and everything that was going on here at home, nobody was supporting the movie. Just nobody wanted to help us. And we were like, this is a Canadian story. It's like, it's got all the ingredients. Alicia Cuthbert's Canadian. I'm Canadian. The writer's Canadian. The producer's Canadian. Everybody's Canadian except for Josh at this point.
Yeah.
So we were like, you know what? No. And it just financially, the producer said we couldn't do it here. It wasn't going to work. We needed a certain amount of money to make the film the right way. We'd be in Vancouver. We'd be in Toronto. We'd be in Ottawa. So they said, Georgia has a much better tax credit than Canada, which is really sad to hear, obviously.
Yeah.
So we picked up and we left and we went to Georgia. And then, fortunately we came back in September and we did a few days in Ottawa. But most of it was literally Georgia, which gave me like heart palpitations because I'm like, okay, great. Finally, I've got this like Canadian movie. My patriotism's at like an all-time high. Right. We're going to leave now.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And lured down there.
Yeah. I thought it's crazy. I thought we were going to be shooting in Atlanta because I said to myself, I could have Atlanta double for Vancouver. I can make that work. The architecture, the busy sidewalks, the street corners, like that's not hard. Mm-hmm. Then I get there and I'm like, oh, wait, I'm not going to Atlanta. I'm going to the south of Georgia, border of Florida, Georgia, towns I've never heard of Georgia.
Oh, wow.
And that's where I have to figure out a way to double 1986 and 1988 Canada. And so, yeah.
It's strange to imagine something that's so up the middle Canadian set in those cities.
Yeah.
Not being able to utilize those cities.
Yeah.
But in a way, those cities have changed so much since then anyways.
It's another curveball.
It's another bit of a tricky thing to scrub out modern Vancouver from Vancouver.
And then couple that with the fact that pretty much most of the people on the crew side in the departments had never even been to Canada.
Oh.
So I'm like Craig and I are basically going either off memory or Google Maps or Dropbox like references that we created to show them this is what the currency looked like. This is what the health cards looked like. These are what the street corners looked like. This is where the real Robert Whiteman would frequent. This is where the real Tommy Kaye had his strip club. Like these are the neighborhoods. It was, but it was great though because it was a great exercise in prep.
Yeah.
So it was a good way to sort of build on that skill.
But are these banks like CIBCs and Scotia banks? Like they're all like, Canadian banks.
Scotia banks. So we obviously couldn't get the rights of the banks because it's sort of like a defamatory nature in which you're displaying them, right?
Right.
So we had to basically use like color patterns that would signify, hey, this actually says Gold Crown, but it's really CIBC.
That's what I figured, like the maroon and gold.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So he would have, it's strange to think in Canada, you're not dealing with independent bank owners. Like there's no private banking. So it's like he's hitting a string of TDs. He's hitting a string of like CIBCs, literally.
Yeah, they just don't communicate as much because it's like the 80s and there's no digital backups. There's none of that.
Yeah, no paper trails. One of the things is like he robbed the same bank like multiple times.
Yes, he did that a few times in real life.
This guy, he's just, wilding. I thought that was just, crazy.
Well, yeah, when you don't have the security footage.
Yeah.
And you're swapping disguises. The joke is now with COVID, with the masks. If you had COVID then.
Everyone looks like a bank robber.
Everybody looks like a bank robber.
Yeah.
That was one of the things I really enjoyed about the movie was all the costume changes and all of his, just all the different costumes, the prosthetics, the changing clothes. And that was one I made a note of. My favorite scene was when it was like kind of like quick cuts of all the fast bank robberies and the counters going up. And then he does the tearaway of a pants and
It's like
and I was
here,
like, I'm always changing clothes when we're doing
would not work today with DNA and forensics.
No,
definitely wouldn't work today.
That's what I was like. I was like, only in the 80s would this work. You couldn't get away with anything like that now.
No way.
Not even close. No. And there was 200 scenes, 95 locations.
That's about right.
Yeah,
it was
like wild.
Absurd.
The logistics around that movie must be
and
crazy.
Not doing it at home in your backyard where you have like a network of people that you can rely on, do favors. It was very overwhelming because we basically got to Georgia and we had 5 weeks to figure out what to do. And I've never been to Georgia.
Right.
And let alone these cities, again, that I've never heard of, that I just discovered. One was a college town called Valdosta. Great place, great food, great people. Doesn't look like Canada. So I'm basically going with my cinematographer and Craig and other people, and we're literally going to street corners and being like, this corner looks Canadian, or this building has architecture that looks similar to Ottawa or to Vancouver or to wherever, Edmonton, wherever it was that we were going to shoot the scene. So it was a lot of that and just like trying to figure out how we were going to make it work.
So before you go down there and actually start filming, you've got to secure all of these locations.
Yeah. Well, that's what you'd think. We didn't secure any of them because when I got there, we didn't have the infrastructure that I thought because the movie was like getting put together so fast when we kind of got the thumbs up, the green light was going to happen. The people that were helping us on the crew side had I think they were just finishing another movie. So we had to go out a lot of the times on our own without like location scouts and just find stuff on our own. And then we had a location manager come in who just finished WandaVision.
Wow.
So he was kind of getting ready to go, and he came in, he saw my wall in my office of all the locations, and he was like, oh my God, this is a joke, right? How are we going to do this in 21 days? I said, I don't know, man, but we're going to try.
Yeah.
So you sort of embark with basically a calendar, a spreadsheet. Like what do you start with? You've got everything in a spreadsheet. You must have all this whole thing in a spreadsheet.
I'm bad at Excel,
and a calendar.
so I don't have
spreadsheets,
spreadsheets, but I have the closest thing to a spreadsheet. I basically just have my lists of things that we need to get. I had a wall in my office which was, okay, the Glebe house in the movie, and here are the 3 options in Georgia of the locations with the addresses of the house, the corresponding house that would work. Or opening bank, I'd have 4 locations, and I'd say, okay, now we got to create a grid, like a map. Because when you're filming, when you do these unit moves, it's very expensive and timely to pack up
here and then come back here.
Yeah.
Right.
And leapfrogging is where a lot of your time and transportation costs get sucked up. So we were trying to figure out how are we going to do this, and it got to a point where we were in this other town called Tifton, and I had they gave me a golf cart, and literally what would happen was we would split up into 3 units because there was just no time to get everything. So we'd have one unit shooting a scene with like Nestor Carbonell, for instance, and Nestor's a big TV director now too, not just a great actor, and so I would kind of leave some of it to him, and I'd come back and forth with my portable monitor to check on him.
Yeah.
Then I would drive across town like 3-4 blocks because, I can't be running with all this stuff on me to another set where we've got a crane set up, getting a shot of like some background people. And then I'd go on foot to where Josh is in the costume shop with the girl behind the counter. And literally some of our days function exactly like that. Me running, and they'd say action, and as soon as it's a cut, they're like, okay, Alan's on the move to you guys, and I'd run back to the other set. It was bonkers.
Yeah, I bet. And all of, like, I mean, you're involved right with the editing, you're involved in every nuance of the thing. You're like living and breathing, and every word they're speaking,
for better or for worse.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's you actually can't be too much of a control freak if you have different sets operating at the same time.
I find a way.
Yeah,
I find a way.
And like do you, like, so you're running around, you got multiple locations, leapfrogging in your golf cart. Does it really stick to the script, or some things kind of wing it? Like,
I would say a lot of it, again,
because I know you're pressed for time.
Yeah, well, you're pressed for time, which is why prep is so important. And the thing that some people say about prep is like you can't stick to the script or to an ideal too much because you have to be open to change and to adapting. Something happens on the day, it rains. Now you can't shoot outside. You got to do this. Mm-hmm. So I try to stay as flexible as possible, but the bare minimum is I say to myself, okay, what is the crux of the scene? What do I need to accomplish in this day? How many things are absolutely necessary, and how much can I throw to the side? Because I would say there's probably 35 minutes of deleted scenes from the actual movie, and then there was an additional 15 or 20 pages that we never even shot from the original script. Because this book, right, spans the life of Gilbert Galvin. I mean, it could have been a miniseries, essentially. Right. So when you go into a day like that, you basically just have to say to yourself, okay, it's going to be all right if something changes, but if there is something that is absolutely integral to the narrative or to the character, you got to make sure that hits that. And thankfully, with these sort of multiple little mini units we were running, people knew how important certain moments were to me. Or I'd get on walkie-talkie and be like, "Did you do that thing that I asked you? You did it, right? You did exactly like that." They're like, "Yes, we did exactly like that."
Yeah.
Like, all right, cool.
You're like, okay, we can move on.
Yeah, I can breathe now. Yeah.
Cool.
So when you cast a role, how far do you expect that actor to deviate from like the normal essence of them? Are you trying to you sort of in the sense that what's more important, casting or trying to push them into a direction of acting and being like how you want them to be? How do you balance
like
that?
A character?
Yeah.
Look, 80%, some people say 80% of directing is casting. Mm-hmm. And so you have to acknowledge and accept that when you hire someone, or rather they say yes to your offer, you are trusting them implicitly. to take the character into the direction that they feel it's going to go. You have to be there to rein them in if they deviate too much. But if you're going to try to tell them to stick to every single word and every single beat, you're not going through the process right. Because, Josh said to me once, he's like, it's my job to look at the words on the page, find out where they have meaning and find out where there's something that doesn't add up. And then I have to call you out and say, listen, I don't think this works. How are we going to problem solve? And how are we going to make this scene make sense? Or how's this arc going to make sense?
Right.
So, luckily I was very blessed with the cast that I got. And Josh really took the character and he made it into his own. He obviously had source material to work off of.
Yeah.
And there's no shortage of it. But he decided that he would take it in a direction that had a little bit more levity than I had already sort of figured I would inject into the film.
And when you say source
great.
material, you mean like video of the original guy? And
The book. The book. There's clips. There's little mini docs on YouTube. You can find interviews. There's old newspaper stuff that that got updated and digitized and with other interviews. So there's enough to sort of understand the cadence and the character.
Yeah, it wasn't like a brand new character that ever existed. This is because it's based on a true story. There was all kinds of factual information. He could be like, oh, okay, I know this
You're
guy.
not going to like hop on set and like backseat drive Mel Gibson. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
You should.
Like
You
it's
should.
like,
I would
what
hope-
was that
I would
like?
hope-
You know what I
I would
mean?
hope not, yeah.
Working with
So-
Mel Gibson.
It was great.
Legendary.
Honestly,
Yeah.
he has this uncanny resemblance to the real Tommy K, who was a guy.
does,
Who was a guy named Tommy Craig, whose strip club, The Playmate, was actually in the Vanier part of Ottawa.
Okay.
And so the real Tommy, it's crazy. The only difference is that he was a much heavier set guy, so his nickname was the Fat Man.
Okay.
Which is hilarious because Mel did a movie called The Fat Man a couple
Yeah.
of years ago where he plays Santa Claus. So Mel, first and foremost, was a creative choice. I mean, he looked like Tommy. He was Tommy as soon. And even look, when we were sort of doing the revisions on the script during the development phase, we'd always talked about Mel, and I it's like a bucket list thing for me. I grew up watching Lethal Weapon. I grew up
Yeah.
watching all his stuff.
Yeah, me
I'm a
too.
huge Mel fan. So yeah, he was incredible. He was great. And he's great in the film.
Yeah, he is great.
Hey, he sinks into that role perfectly.
He really does.
I'm surprised he hasn't done more sort of.
Yeah,
that side of him is that dark side of him is great.
It's funny you say dark side, but
Well,
what we really
yes,
set out
you're
to,
right, it's not
what we set
super
out to
dark.
do was subvert that expectation and sort of flip the trope on its head, because you're going to see a trailer and a poster with Mel and bank robberies, heists. He punches a guy in the trailer. Oh, he's probably going to end up on the wrong side of Mel, Josh, right? He's going to end up on the wrong side.
Right.
All these sort
I
of
like that he
typical
didn't-
cliches,
Yeah.
right? And what we wanted to do was say, look, he comes off, surface value as like this tough gangster, but he's really like a teddy bear. He's kind of like a friendly uncle and a mentor, and that's kind of the direction we took it in, because that's actually what happened, right?
Yeah.
But also, I wanted that to be sort of like a fuck you to the people who were going to turn it on and think it was like a geezer teaser Bruce Willis movie or whatever.
Yes.
Because Mel's done a couple of those now, and so I was sort of like, I can't wait for you guys to see this. And it's the complete, there's no guns, there's no shooting, there's no dead people, there's no explosions.
Right. I liked that it wasn't violent.
Yeah.
And,
There was
and
an explosion outside the jewelry store.
I don't know
but
if
it was a
Can you call
small
that an explosion? Firecrackers? I
Okay,
don't know.
firecracker.
Firecracker. Diversion.
Yeah, okay.
my wife doesn't like violent movies.
Yeah.
And it was totally something I was comfortable showing her, because
Right.
it wasn't like this violent, goring, like torture scene
my
type
grandma
thing
too,
out of
so yeah.
out of the mom. Yeah.
Shout out to
My
her.
9-year-old grandmother would feel the same way.
Which
Yeah.
I liked. And Alicia was great in it.
Yeah.
Alicia's incredible in this film. It's funny. She was always my first choice for Andrea. And unbeknownst to me, she had actually read the script before we had officially gone to her, because what happened was Josh and her share a manager.
Oh, wow.
So
That's
he had
perfect.
He had slipped the script to her. And COVID hits.
which makes sense that she would get that script.
COVID hits. Nobody has any clue what's happening with the movie. Are we making it? Are we not? When are we making it? Where are we making it? And this whole time, I think they were waiting for us to officially go and bring it to Alicia, which is something the producer does. If it was me, I probably would have just been like DMing her on Instagram, be like, I want you to do this movie, which you cannot do.
No. Okay.
So when I got a call from a 647 number, I picked it up and it was her. We kind of just hit it off right away as
Yeah.
Canadians.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? And her saying how much it spoke to her never really having had a chance to play like a Canadian character like this before, and bringing this sort of maturity and depth to the role in a way that we haven't really seen from her before, sort of like amalgamating her comedy and her dramatic chops. It was amazing.
Yeah, and the thing was, they ended up really in a committed, like they were committed to each other.
Yeah.
You know, which is, you'd think the guy would go to jail and there wouldn't be a lot of commitment there and run off. But yeah, they ended up in it seems like, did they stay together the whole time it was in jail, or what happened?
No, there's a chiron at the end of the film.
Yeah, at the end.
Spoiler for anyone who watched the movie. But
alert.
Yeah, no, they got divorced very shortly after, unfortunately.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Unfortunately.
it's tough to make it through.
They have such great chemistry in the film, you want them to stay together.
Yeah, you do want them to stay together.
Like,
I pictured them together. So.
Listen, this means that the relationship spoke to you.
It did. Right? It did.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so he goes through, he does this 59 successful heists. And it seems like the last one, like the big problem he had on the one job was because Mel decides to have this guy stick around with him.
Yeah.
And that's true? That's
so
right.
What actually happened was when he started getting into jewelry, right? So the whole thing was, everything changed, when he went from banks to jewelry stores and would have an extra man. Right? Mm-hmm. And we all know, we've seen every movie stereotype. It's never a good idea to have an extra person who could be a witness or flip on you or screw something up. So this guy, Baptiste was his real name. He apparently, he had like the worst, like crop tops and jean shorts and a nasty coke addiction. The coke addiction, which is in the movie. But he literally left a shotgun at the scene of the crime. And that's one of those moments where it's so absurd that it has to be real, which is why we tell everyone this actually happened. It's not like we forgot as the filmmakers to tidy up that storyline. Like, he legitimately left so what it was in a stairwell. So the jewelry store was in this this big mall in Vancouver. And, when you go out through the main entrance, there's other storefronts, and then there's the fire escapes and the stairwells. So they went out, and there was a police convention happening. And they actually ran into a bunch of cops who didn't know that they had just robbed a jewelry store, which we wanted to put in the movie, but that was way too expensive. We need like 100 extras, and it would have been crazy. So they ended up going into this stairwell, and he dropped the shotgun in the stairwell, and that's how they traced it back to Tommy and eventually caught Robert.
Yeah. Oh, gosh, if you want something done right, you got to do it yourself.
It's true.
Yeah, you really do.
It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I live that far too often. You probably do too.
That's 100% true.
So growing up, were you always into cameras? Like, when did you start to?
Yeah, I mean, as far back as I can remember, movies were my jam.
Yeah.
My mother, funny enough, was in the business from a different side. She had this store which was owned by Kodak, and so back when they did like 24-hour photo processing before digital was a thing, she did a lot of the development for TV shows and movies that were doing like location scouting. So they'd go
Canada.
Here in Toronto. So if you went and you took photos of like this building, you'd go to her lab, she'd process it, give it to the location scout. And then my father, who was in the telecommunications business, was supplying walkie-talkies to a lot of sets as well. So they actually paired up with a separate business at the time that would supply anything from walkie-talkies to the crew or cell phones for the actors before roaming and before all these plans existed. Yeah. And the funniest thing is that it was 2004, and I was about to go to film school for the very first time in Los Angeles. And I didn't have a phone yet because at that time, kids our age didn't really have cell phones. It wasn't a thing. So my mom gets me a phone. It's the original BlackBerry, like the blue, the big blue brick.
Yeah, that one, with the wheel on the side.
Yep. And the highest resolution. And so I go to Los Angeles. And right before I leave, my mom says, "Hey, listen, there's only so many phone lines that you have when you have like a business account with Rogers, right?"
Right. Yeah.
And so Ray Romano and Gene Hackman were in town shooting Welcome to Mooseport, okay? And Ray Romano needed another line. He needed another number, and my mom didn't have any. So she comes to me and she says, "Listen, I know you just memorized your phone number. I know you just gave it to all your friends. I need that back, and I'm going to give you a different SIM card and a different phone." I was like, "Why?" She's like, "Ray Romano needs it." I was like, "Fuck Ray Romano. I just gave this to all my friends." And so I meet this girl at film school, and she asked me for my number, and I start reciting it, and I went, "Oh, nope, wrong number. It's and I can't remember it. And I go, you know what? It's in my room. I'll go get it. She's like,
Okay.
really? I was like, no, listen. Ray Romano has my phone. She's like, oh, this is the best you can come up with? Okay, see you later. I was like, no, I'm not. Yeah. So I was always fascinated by movies. And
that story didn't end up with her calling Ray Romano.
No, it didn't. But a couple of people did, and my mom was very unhappy about it.
I bet.
One of them might have been me. But yeah, I grew up watching movies. My dad had all the VHS tapes of like the Bond films and the early like Michael Bay stuff like Bad Boys and The Rock. So I used to just sort of skip school and watch movies.
I watched The Rock young too.
Yeah.
I
watched everything young.
That one was really impressionable on me. That was a great movie.
Yeah, that's like my favorite.
Yeah, that's like one of my favorite movies too.
Yeah, the 90s era action movies and some of the more seminal stuff that came
and Sean
before it.
Connery, like to me, that was Sean Connery.
Oh, that was Sean
And then
Connery,
I watched all the Bonds after that.
And
so
you
like
wonder if there's a tie-in.
To
There's
me,
still
that
articles. People think that was like a subtle nod to this is where Bond is like 30 years later.
Oh, really?
After, like he retires. There's all these like conspiracy theory articles, like BuzzFeed, and like you should go check it out. It's awesome.
So that was the first time you saw Nicolas Cage in a movie?
It
was my first time. As The Rock,
the first time I saw Nick Cage in a movie, it might have been The Rock, because The Rock came before Con Air and Face Off. Face Off and Con Air I watched religiously as a kid too. I snuck into a theater to watch some of Face Off, but yeah, it might have been the first time.
He was fantastic in that.
Oh, Stanley Goodspeed, Beatles fanatic.
Yeah, and I remember, it was the first, I'd say, blockbuster sort of like I saw with and Hans Zimmer did the score, and I had that score, and my dad played that score on the way to school like all the time.
Nothing like firing up for school listening to Hans Zimmer, right?
And to hockey, like in the morning to hockey we used to listen.
That's so funny. Yeah, my dad played a lot of movie scores as well, and like I always love movie scores though. I mean, what's really cool is my Netflix film Gridlocked, the guy who composed the score for that, Jacob Shea, actually works with Hans. And so when I was sitting in post for that film, I was actually at Hans' studio. Where he kind of fosters new talent, and they all get their own sort of booth and their own like office in like this big campus
in LA.
Yeah,
is that the one with his massive synthesizers? Like his main room.
So it's called remote control.
There's
this building in Santa Monica where you have basically the students, and then in the center of the complex outside, you go across, and there's this little building which is basically Hans's shrine.
Yeah, that's phenomenal.
So yeah, I'm a huge Hans fan. I saw him in concert here. I don't know if you know, he was here a few years ago. I think it was like 2017, and he played live.
I didn't see
ACC.
live, but I've seen one of his more recent shows. I've seen he put it on DVD. It's like on DVD or
like a masterclass.
And not the I have that too. But no, the one where he does a live show with a bunch of his different movies in it, which was cool, and they all perform it live, and he performs a lot of it live. But he's
it's amazing.
One thing about Hans Zimmer, and it actually is a thread that goes through probably your work and a lot of everything that we do, is even though he has all the money and the capabilities and the tools and the instruments and the whole thing, he really knows how to boil it down to the fundamental emotion of any role, any piece of music, or any track.
Well, that's the thing about music. It needs to complement what's happening on screen. It has to evoke a certain emotion from a character standpoint. Like good composers, great composers, and they're great for a reason. They understand that better than anybody.
Did you get his masterclass?
I did not. I did not. I've seen the clips or the ads running on Facebook. But I'm like, no, I don't want the masterclass. I'm going to wait till I work with him.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
My way of not spending $80 or whatever it is.
Do you play an instrument?
So when I grew up, I played violin. This is actually crazy.
Hard one.
I played violin for 7 years.
Wow.
And I actually played at Carnegie Hall.
Wow.
Which is a random story not a lot of people
You're
know.
a violin player.
No, well, don't say that, because if you gave me a violin right now, it would be embarrassing.
Oh, it'd be less embarrassing than if I picked it up.
Or also me. Also me.
That's possible.
I don't.
It's hard to make any decent sound on a violin, let alone actually play the damn thing.
I played. My parents were very strict about me having sort of musical capabilities, and I think there's a lot of parents that think it's important for kids to sort of be cultured in a certain way and understand music. Music is such an important way of life, whether it's to de-stress, whether it's to go enjoy in a communal sense at a concert. Music's so powerful, and so I played at Carnegie Hall with I think 50 other kids as part of this the Suzuki group. It was called. It was 1996. I was there as a kid. And,
cool.
It was so I love music.
David Suzuki?
No.
What's the connection to
it's just
Suzuki?
called the Suzuki Group. It's not David. My whole life I thought it was David Suzuki.
Yeah, I bet.
Well,
what's
my
the
mom
Suzuki
is like,
connection?
why are you telling
The
people
car?
that this like philanthropist, environmentalist guy is like your violin teacher? And I was like, no, I just thought it was his group. I don't know, something on the side. But yeah, and I played piano for a couple of years as well after that.
Oh, nice.
But,
Those are two of the hardest.
They're very difficult. I am not musical anymore other than my instincts. Like when it comes to the sort of like the creative, I understand music very well. Like I speak the language of music, but I cannot play worth a shit. Yeah, I can't.
And then did someone get you into mixed martial arts?
Oh man. Yeah, it's funny because I was out in Los Angeles, like 19, 20 years old, and I'm trying to figure out if I'm going to make it in the business or, what am I going to do? Am I going to go get a master's? Am I going to go to post-grad? And I met some people in Los Angeles who happen to be from London, Ontario, and Toronto. And they said, we're putting together like a film fund. We're going to make some independent films. Do you have any ideas? And I pitched some ideas. And they said, okay, we'll think about it. And then they came back and said, look, we have an idea for a mixed martial arts movie, and you can write it. And I said, mixed martial arts is not really my thing, and I don't want to just be a writer. But if you let me direct it, I'll pretty much do it for free, which was a very stupid thing of me to say because they pretty much took me up on it. And thankfully, I was living at home. So I had to do a lot of research for the film Tapped, which I ended up making. And I am a huge MMA fan now. I don't miss any events. And everybody on that movie ended up, they couldn't care less anymore. They don't watch it. It's no interest to them. But
What year was that movie?
So we shot that in 2012.
Okay, so that's
is when
still
Anderson
after
Silva was
Ultimate
still-
Fighter. Ultimate Fighter started.
Yeah. And the Contender series, I think, started shortly after that. But yeah, I mean, Anderson Silva was still the middleweight champion. George St. Pierre was still the welterweight champion.
Yeah,
It was a
nice.
different era.
Oh, yeah, that was a time.
Yeah, that was a time.
Well, not super classic, sort of mid-range classic guys.
Yeah, like it wasn't the Gracie days.
Yeah,
it was
exactly.
The next generation after that. Yeah, but are you an MMA fan?
Yeah, my uncle got us into MMA
Okay.
young, during Gracie years.
Okay, so like the underground UFC 1 days where it's like one guy who just has to fight his way up like old school tournament style.
So always, I mean, I've never actually done it. But
Yeah, I haven't.
but a friend of mine got, a close friend of mine, our bassist in our band, got into it, heavily into it. And now he's got an incredibly successful gym, and he's a black belt way over, and he's been doing it for 16 years. His name's
So
Matthew
he could
Pasquale.
train you if you have the time.
Oh yeah, he could train me for sure. He's a jiu-jitsu black belt now.
I'd love to try a class in that.
Yeah,
I'd be
I'm sure.
into
I would
it.
tap out so fast.
Yeah,
It's so funny
pun
because I went
intended.
through and I made this whole movie, and at no point in time did I say,
like,
you know what, I'm going to get in the ring and try to.
Just try one class.
for you.
No,
Nope, not doing
No.
it.
So this is out of film school. Like I was going through your film, your bio and your filmography, and you're in film school, but like that opportunity just sort of. Like,
Yeah,
how did
'Cause
what
you
do
were
chalk
young.
up to that opportunity.
Yeah, so I was
Like,
20
How did that one come along?
3 when I directed my first movie, which is, very lucky. I'm super grateful. But I would look. I would attribute it partially to my work ethic and my sort of no nonsense, just hustle. But also, luck plays into it.
But prior to that, you're doing what type of work? Like out of
So
out
when
of
you're listening,
school?
I was in school, so I wasn't working. I mean, in the
Right.
summer, I'd go to like a temp placement agency just to make some, some money, make a couple bucks, and be able to like go on a trip with my friends to Cuba, which at the time was like the place to go.
Yeah.
$700, 5 days, all in.
Yeah.
God, don't miss those days.
No.
But yeah. So I was in my 3rd year of university at York, where I got rejected from the film program. Funny enough, and I was forced into film history and theory. So the production, I guess, organization there, they just didn't. They didn't want me.
They really know how to pick.
I'm sure they do now.
They didn't want me. Yeah, they asked for a donation here and there. I might send something. We'll see. Yeah, I was just making short films. I was just trying to experiment, figure it out, write on spec, figure out the best way to sort of understand what do audiences want, get an understanding for the business. A lot of people wake up, they look at their stocks. I wake up, I look at the trades. I look at what's happening in the world, what scripts are selling, what actors are doing what kind of material they want to do, who do they want to work with. So just sort of building this sort of encyclopedic knowledge in my mind.
For sure. Because it's an unwritten business in a way. It's a bit of vaporware trying to figure out business in a sense.
There's no one path. There's
Right.
no one right way to do it. I know people who started as assistants. I know people who started as gaffers or cinematographers. I was very fortunate in that I didn't have to start with anything. I sort of went out to Los Angeles. I met some people. I opened my mouth. It took me far enough. I was like, fake it till you make it. Okay, great. And then I was making movies at that point and just sort of learning from there and sort of working my way up.
Yeah.
But I also gave up a lot to do that because – I went to a private Jewish school, which is already really demanding throughout the year. And then you finish exams, and I would get on the flight the next day and I'd go to Los Angeles. I go to film school all summer. My friends went to Birthright. My friends backpacked to Europe. My friends had all these sort of like worldly experiences. And I said, no, I'm just going to go and bust my ass, and I'll take those vacations later in life.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was through high school.
Yeah, so I started film school in high school.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're in high school
years.
here for the whole year.
Yeah, so I went to Chat.
And then you head down. Okay, so you went to, okay.
Yeah, which is like as Jewish as it gets.
Yeah, it's also demanding too.
And there was no air conditioning in the Richmond Hill location.
Oh, wow.
So you're basically sitting and like
schwitzing
and sweating like all year round, even in winter.
Right.
And then it's done, and you just want to like take a break, relax.
Oh,
no,
yeah.
I went right to
intense,
school.
Chat. It's much more demanding than Metro. I went to Metro.
Oh, you went to Metro? Okay, yeah.
It was far less demanding.
Yeah, Metro,
Chat.
Westmount, Thornhill, all of those places.
Yeah.
Yeah, so no, I
could have went to film school. No problem. I could have went during the year.
Listen, I mean, it's funny, I got into a couple of the programs at Queens, Western, U of T, Ryerson. I can't remember why I chose York, to be honest. I think because I had heard that their program was most competitive. I think like each year only like 50 students move on or something like that. Not that it mattered because they rejected me at the outset.
Yeah.
So I was like, whatever. So I didn't even go. Like I stopped going to class and I just started going out and making my own short films. And I graduated. I got my degree and made my parents really happy.
Yeah, you still graduated.
And of course, when I used to tell this story, my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, is like, don't go around boasting that you didn't go to school. You sound like a loser. You sound like a bum. I was like, no, that's not what I'm trying to say. It's just
Yeah.
like,
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's the grind of sort of finding a way too.
Yeah.
But if you're passionate enough and you're prepared to actually create things and show them to people, it's a hell of an edge over people who are passionate and not prepared to create anything and not prepared to share anything.
You just got to get in and do the work.
Much school can teach you in any profession or industry. I mean, you have to really go to like real boot camp, be on a movie set to understand how it functions. You know what I mean? It's just there's nothing like it. Like if you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a resident, whatever it is, you have to be in the hospital. You have to see how it goes. Sitting in a lecture hall, being told what to do is not. I mean, there's certain fundamentals you have to learn and understand first.
Of course.
Fine. But nothing's like being in the real environment.
So with Bandit, with all these locations, that must have been by far the most locations you've ever.
Oh God, yeah. I mean,
like
location,
imagine the
scenes,
MMA
page
movie.
count. Yeah, well, I mean, it's funny, in any movie, whether you have a big $50 million budget or you're making a $2 million movie, you should always understand how to be cost effective.
Yeah,
right.
And so doubling locations up tends to be a really, wise thing that people do. It's very common. So it's like, okay, if I look at this wall and I say this will be, her house, this will be like the area where he stands at the window. But then when we look over here, I can shoot inserts of a scene from somewhere else in the film. Right. That way we don't have to leapfrog and move around a lot. So that was the key. And so when I got to Georgia, I had to really familiarize myself with the environment, the world, the locations. And once we had a location, I'd have to say, how can this be used for 4 other things?
Right.
And that was the only way we can get it done.
Yeah, because that's a lot to get done in 25 weeks.
20. I wish.
21. No,
21 days.
5 weeks,
Yeah.
21 days. Or 21 days.
4
So not
weeks,
even 4 weeks.
So you Google street viewing a hell of a lot? You must be on
Oh
Google
my
Street
God!
View
I
like
remember.
crazy.
I remember. I drove my art team and my locations department nuts because there's this really vital moment at the beginning of the film where Josh's character hops off a truck that he got hitched a ride from, and he's in Ottawa. He's in Canada now, and I was like, okay, well, I don't think we're gonna have Josh in Canada. And if he says he can, don't count on it because something, could get in the way and it may not happen. So I found this sort of block in front of a courthouse in Valdosta, this college town. And the courthouse had been shut down for 20 years. They were restoring it. The construction was going to start this year. So it was completely abandoned. And there were like 15 sets we built in there. Okay.
Wow.
So right out front, there was this building across the street by the sidewalk that literally looked like a building across from Parliament Hill. So I said to everybody, look, we're going to shoot Josh pulling up here, and then I'm going to go to Ottawa and shoot the reverse looking at Parliament Hill. But the building is so similar that I think everyone's going to think Josh is actually in Ottawa. Right?
I did.
Good. This is
Yeah,
great.
you wouldn't.
I
exactly.
was like, oh,
Yeah.
okay.
There's going to be one person who's going to be like, that's not Ottawa.
Right.
Yeah.
That bastard.
They will now.
But I drove my team nuts with Google Map, references and Street View references. And then finally when I went and got the shot a couple months later in Ottawa, I was like, look, guys, look, I did it. But it was a lot of that. It was a lot of like, I need this wall. I need this sort of like entryway to a building because it looks like Ottawa. And then they'd be like, well, why doesn't that building look like Ottawa or Vancouver? And I'm like, you've never been to Canada. You don't understand.
Yeah, I bet.
You just don't understand.
You just don't get it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can imagine that. And then so you'll shoot that day worth of scenes. And what is everything sitting on a hard drive? And you must be like clamoring to get at that.
So usually
drive.
you'll have camera cards, and then the cards get dumped onto a drive, and then the drive gets cloned like 3 times.
Yeah, no, I know.
And
With
that's supposed to
this, it's like
happen
you
at the
become
end
so
of
anal
every
about it.
day. But we
Doing
were
dailies.
shooting so much footage. I was told that the production had to buy so many more hard drives than they were accustomed to because of the sheer volume
I
and
bet.
the speed at which we were moving.
And are they shooting in 4K?
We shot in 6K.
Yeah, you're shooting in 6K.
So we
you're
were shooting
going
on the
through
Sony
drives
Venice, which
like
shoots 6K.
crazy.
Oh.
You're going through because I know it only from here. Like, and this is like 6 cameras pumping out all the time.
Yeah, so we
onto
shot
this drive.
50-something terabytes worth
Yeah.
of footage. And I think
Yeah,
the
I bet.
production company that we
Wow.
were working with in the States said they were averaging about 25 to 26 terabytes of film.
Wow.
We were like pretty much double.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So and then when you're sitting there editing it, like I saw on Instagram, you're editing it. Basically, you're
I worked
there-
with an editor, yeah.
Yeah, worked with an editor. And you're looking at all that content. You've got, for each scene that you're choosing, you've got all sorts of, like, it's like,
And it's really bad
mind-boggling
because
amount
I'm
it
a
takes.
neurotic perfectionist who loves options. And so we'd find ourselves in situations where we would just have, I can't even tell you the amount of times that we had a scene or just a moment in a scene where I had 3 versions of it. And I said, I really love this because look at the way Josh does that thing with his eyes, or look
Yeah.
at the way he the inflection point or his intonation.
Yeah.
It was so overwhelming because we had so much to choose from. And the crazy thing again, it was like the first cut of the movie was 3 hours long. Okay. And so trying to figure out what to excise from that was really stressful in and of itself. On top of the fact that I already was like, I got so many options to choose from with the scenes
for
that
each
are
of
going to make
the
it.
moment
Yeah.
in each hour. Yeah, exactly.
Does any of that, deleted scenes ever get used? Could it, when you used to get a DVD and then you'd have deleted scenes when you watch like a DVD?
Physical media is different now.
You know?
I just found out I'm not even doing a director's commentary because most of the transactional buys are going to be on like iTunes or Amazon or
Yeah.
Hulu or whatever. So I think what I'll probably do is end up releasing some of them on like my YouTube channel. I built this huge following because of the Uncharted thing I did. So I have I keep forgetting I have like 30,000 followers on YouTube that I don't do anything with. I'm like, I should post
That's
more
a
or do
great thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think I'm going to probably release because there's some really wonderful actors in the film who didn't make it into the final cut. You always hear about, I think it was even there was a famous actress that didn't make it into Spider-Man, The Amazing Spider-Man 2. I forget who it was, but it was like, okay, what are you supposed to do when that person is constantly messaging you saying, I can't wait to see the movie? And you go, oh no, they're not
Yes.
even
Oh
in
my
the
God, that
movie.
happened to me.
What are you supposed to say? That happened to you?
No, I was in a film with Richard Dreyfuss called Astronaut.
Okay.
And they actually picked me out to be a contestant. It was like you could win in the movie, Richard Dreyfuss is a contestant to win a trip to space. So they actually asked me because knew me from Instagram. And they're like, you know what, let's get Casey Stewart to be in this film. So I had a couple days on set. It was at Much Music and MTV where I used to work. So I was
Okay.
like, I'm here filming a movie. I'm so cool.
Back to your stomping grounds.
Yeah, and then I was like,
Yeah, you
look at
shared
me
it with
now.
people, you told
yeah, and I was
people.
like, I'm in this movie. It's on iTunes.
Yeah,
It's on.
no big deal. You're going to see me in it. You're going to
I'm in
Guaranteed.
I'm in 1 or 2 scenes, and the close-ups of me on the show, as the contestant, not even in there.
Oh, no.
I felt like such a loser
Yeah,
Listen,
you can't share it.
It happens.
because I think they knew I would promote it.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
and then cut you.
But please promote it anyway.
I got a bait and switch on that. They cut me, and I told everyone, and like
it's an awkward thing though as a director.
I bet
right? Because and the funny thing is that it's not up to me. Well, look, obviously, no movie should be 2.5, 3 hours long. Like if it doesn't have to be, I'm not Tarantino, so I shouldn't strive for that. But ultimately, the scenes that make it in or don't make it in, I have to have I have to weigh in on that.
Yeah.
So I remember on my first film, Tapped, there was this lovely actress, and after I told her that she wouldn't make it in the movie, I saw her walking. I was on a patio, and she walked right by me on the street. I was like, "Hi!"
Yeah.
And she was very friendly, thank God. But I haven't had to do that since. Like I haven't had, and in this case, there's 3 or 4 actors that don't even have a single moment in the film because we had to cut sections out.
My heart goes out to them.
And they're being invited to the premiere in LA.
Yeah.
And so Craig and I were kind of like, we should say something, but what do we say? But
you can say you'll be on my YouTube channel.
Yeah. You'll make it on my YouTube channel.
Here's my YouTube channel.
Yeah. No, there's a lot that didn't make it. And we had this actress from did you see the Jason Bateman show, The Outsider? The Stephen King show?
Oh yeah, I've watched that. Totally.
Haven't.
Yeah.
Because it's like you not a show you and Talia would watch. It's,
okay.
One of the supporting actresses is Claire Bronson in that film. She was terrific. In the show. She was terrific in the show. Plays Josh's mother in the movie. There's a whole sequence in the film where so originally what happened was he's about to do the Big Vancouver. And he gets engaged. So now he's married. And he's like, something doesn't feel right. I'm missing something, right? Because there's these nods and moments earlier in the film where he talks about his family. And we're not really sure if he's lying.
These are scenes.
It's like a 6-minute sequence.
Oh, okay.
And originally what happened was they get engaged. He puts the ring on her finger. She kisses him. And then it cuts to him lying in bed at night. She's asleep. She's got the ring on. He's looking at her. And he's tossing and he's turning. And he goes downstairs, pours himself a drink. He picks up the phone. We hear this woman answer, and he's not sure what to say. He freezes up, so he pretends to be a radio host. And he's like, you just won a trip to Vancouver, and invites her to Vancouver. And then when he gets to Vancouver and he checks into the hotel with the dipshit guy that he's with, Bishop, they push the elevator button, and he goes, hey, I'll be right back. He goes, what are you doing? He's like, I just got to take care of something. And we see that he actually invited her to the hotel that he's staying at. And he goes and he sits down with her. And she's like, the cops have been looking for you for years, and they have this very estranged relationship. And he shows her the ultrasound. He's going to be a dad. She's like, what do you want from me? He's like, I just want to understand why you're not in my life anymore. This is very poignant, emotional. Yeah. And Josh's performance is heartbreaking in this sequence. Heartbreaking. And we spent like half a day filming it, and it didn't even make it into the film.
So when you're trying to decide to cut it, what are the biggest factors what are the biggest reasons why you would cut something like that?
Well, runtime is always the first
So runtime's number one. So you know you've got to ditch. So at some point you realize
something's got to go.
Something's got to go.
Which baby are you going to kill?
Right.
Essentially.
And that's essentially it.
And
because they're all time, they're all money, they're all, and emotion.
It was tough. I mean, so the biggest things that were cut out of this movie had to do with Project Cafe and sort of the police investigation. There were a lot more sequences at the safe house, and them sort of – there's this scene where it kind of goes into a little bit more detail about how much money they made off with from the jewelry heist, which is now in a voiceover. There's the whole sequence with his mom. There was this great intro scene to Nestor Carbonell's character, Snides, which is – there's a little piece of it that made it in the middle of the film during the surveillance montage where we see Nestor kick in a door and he's chasing Diamond Dave, essentially. There was this awesome sequence, which it was only about 2 minutes long, and I go back now and I'm like, I could have slipped it in, but because there's 600 producers on the movie and the end crawl is like 8 minutes long, I was like, yeah, no, that's not going to work. So there was this great intro sequence in Nestor where he's knocking on the door. This is before we meet Mel and before we go to the Playmate, right? And so it sets up why when Nestor comes to the Playmate later, there were these shots of Diamond Dave being like this because Nestor puts pressure on him and he's like, oh, I'm talking to your boy here, he's going to give you up. So there's this whole, again, these little things that get lost, right? And so Nestor's knocking on the door and Diamond Dave comes out in a towel and he puts his ear to the door and he goes, I can hear you, idiot. And he's like, shit. And then his girlfriend comes out of the shower and he's like, give me my pants. And, there's this whole, they're scrambling in the background and he's knocking. He's like, I know you're in here. And then he jumps out the window and girlfriend's like, hey, sorry, he's not here. Wrong apartment. He's like, come on, lady. And so there's this fun encounter. So he goes, unlock the door or I'm kicking it in. So she comes and she goes, how do I know like who you are? And he was like, this shiny thing is a tip off. It's like his badge. She's like, well, that could be fake. And he's like, really? Where are you going? She's like, I'm calling the police. So she calls the police and she's like, I have a guy here who says he's a cop. And they're like, what's his name? She's like, what's your name? And he's at the door. He's like, my name is Snides. Oh my God, are we seriously doing this? And the guy on the other end is like, oh shit, you better let him in. And it was this whole really fun sequence to introduce Nestor's character that had to go.
Yeah.
Because time. Yeah.
So before you film these movies, you've got an idea of what they're going to look like and the vibe of the whole movie.
Right.
Now that this movie's in the can and done, did it hit, did it hit the mark? Did it hit and where does it sort of, in what aspects does it deviate from what you were imagining?
It's funny, a lot of it ended up being very close to what was in my mind, which is not something that happens often. And in my feature experience, it doesn't always happen. I think that in terms of the style and the tone, sort of mixing the humor and the heart, that kind of, I nailed that the way I wanted to nail that. And the bullseye was very small to hit that because there's sort of a balance that you have to strike when it comes to these things, right? You don't want something to be slapstick and goofy. You don't want it to be like super like emotional to the point that it's laughable. So it's a very, very tough balance to strike.
Absolutely.
And
it sounds like Josh Duhamel sort of interpreted that correctly.
He did, and a lot of that was his instinct.
Yes, and that's phenomenal.
That was all him.
Yeah, that's phenomenal.
And there would be times where he wanted to improv and do something different, and I'd be like, and so we basically said, okay, one for you, one for me, and then in the edit we'll figure out who. And I would say most of the time we used his.
Yeah, that's great.
I was, his character when he goes in to rob the very first bank, he's sort of scoping out things, and he comes in with a lisp. And he's got this ridiculously short tie. And when he did the lisp, I called cut, and I was like, oh, dude, you're killing me. You can't do a lisp like that. That's just so goofy. He's like, come on, let me do one more as a safety. So we did it. I said, okay, great, do mine now. I watched the dailies. I was like, fuck, yeah, that's good. We're going to use that.
That's great.
Yeah, we're going to use that. No, I'd say the movie came out as close to what was in my mind as possible. And I know for Craig's been living with this longer than I have because he got the book rights and life rights a couple of years before I got involved. This has been a 5-year journey for me. It's been about 7 or 8 for him.
Wow.
Every time he watches it, he cries because he's just so happy.
Oh, yeah.
We made it.
We did it. We're alive.
Because most of the stories, you hear people who would love to get a movie done and don't.
Any movie.
Yeah, anything.
Any budget, any cast, any opportunity.
Especially a Canadian story.
Especially. And I remember being there. I still feel that way sometimes. I'll do whatever it takes to get something made.
Well, when Bandit comes out, where can people watch it on September 23rd?
I know Cineplex will have it in Toronto and Vancouver. So there's going to be a few theaters in the city and in the suburbs. I know that they've got like Ajax, Peterborough, Ottawa, parts of Toronto, and in Vancouver. And then you'll also get it iTunes, the usual.
Yeah, like rent it.
Yeah, like Shaw, like Rogers, Crave, all that stuff. You'll be able to like rent it or buy it. Yeah, the usual suspects.
Yeah, great. And so today we saw that you are doing a movie or are in the process of doing the movie or done a movie with Nicolas Cage.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about that.
That was a secret I had to keep for the last 4 months.
Yeah, wow. Well, tell us a bit about that because I was like, I have a friend who's like obsessed with Nicolas Cage, so I sent it to her.
Who isn't? I mean, these days, who isn't? You can't do any wrong. Yeah, so I was in Los Angeles finishing post on this.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking to myself, I am so burnt out and I am so exhausted. I can't wait to spend the summer in Toronto and just chill and do absolutely nothing. Yeah. And I got a call from a really, really good friend of mine who we came up together. He produced Tapped. I directed it. He goes, listen, I need somebody on the ground with me, just like a good creative producer to help me figure some stuff out. I'm doing this Nicolas Cage movie. Do you want to come to Vegas for the summer? And I was like, oh, wow. You know what? Yeah.
All of a sudden, you're not tired anymore.
Screw R&R. Let's go live in a casino for 2 months, which I did, and that was bizarre. Yeah, no. So I mean, the movie's called Sympathy for the Devil. And,
great title. Actually, both Bandit and Sympathy for the Devil, great titles.
You know, I'm worried they're going to change Sympathy for the Devil. Oh, it's a mouthful.
And
it's a mouthful, but it's a good title.
Yeah, it's a
song title.
It is. I don't think we're using that song. That song is very expensive.
Yeah.
Oh, we do have a fun musical number and dance sequence in the film I don't want to say anything or spoil it, but I will just say that Nick has a disco sequence in the film, and it's pretty epic. But yeah, Joel Kinnaman's in it as well. If you know All Mankind and Suicide Squad, The Killing,
wow,
they're phenomenal. It's essentially kind of like if you ever saw History of Violence, the Cronenberg movie. So it's about this guy played by Kinnaman who is on the way to the hospital. His wife's about to give birth, and he gets to the hospital. He's in the parking lot, and this guy gets in the back of his car with a gun, Nicolas Cage, and he's like, "Drive," and he's like, "Dude, not an Uber, not a taxi. I think you got the wrong guy," and it becomes this sort of journey in real time over the course of one night where a lot of secrets come to the surface, and Nick thinks that Joel is this guy that he isn't, and mayhem ensues.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's pretty dark. It's pretty twisted.
And this is all filmed in Vegas?
This was all filmed in Vegas, yeah. We were actually...
That must have been cool.
We were going to... Speaking of Georgia, we were going to go to Georgia. Just a place to go. I'm meant to be in Georgia.
Yeah.
But to accommodate Nick, because his wife is about to give birth. She actually might have already. I'm not sure. Wow. But he wanted to be close to home, to the family. And so we made it. And listen, who doesn't want to make a movie in Vegas?
Oh, yeah, sure. I can't imagine. I've been to Vegas, but being there for 4 months.
Yeah, so just over 2 months.
2 months.
And that was too much. Like, there's that whole saying where it's like 4 days, 5 days is all you need in Vegas.
Yeah.
100% true. Now, here's the thing. I loved the people there. We had a great time.
Yeah.
Great experiences and hospitality, like unmatched.
And you lived in a hotel room.
And I lived at the Palms Casino.
Yeah.
Which was insane if you just think about it. My wife was going down because she started her day like 5 a.m. because of Eastern Standard Time. She'd go down to get like her morning coffee, and people would be like,
yeah.
She's like, this is so weird. She left after a week.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, she left after a week. She's like, I'm not staying here.
Yeah.
It's just, it is a city that just exudes excess and just like overindulgence in every way imaginable. So it's a tough place to be for a long time.
And stay the same size.
I didn't gamble once though.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
proud of myself.
smart.
I did not touch a card game, a slot machine, nothing in the 8 weeks I was there.
Yeah, that's good. I'm not into gambling. Whenever I've gone there, I'm like, this is not for me.
Yeah, I've done, you do a little bit of roulette.
That's the story.
Or you do
You
some
blackjack.
That is a true story. I'm just not into it. $20 in the Britney Spears ding ding only.
Oh God!
Because there's a Britney Spears
I've
in
heard
my
people
casino.
lose more money at the strip clubs than they do the casino.
I
Wow.
have probably lost more money at the strip club.
Yeah, you frequent a strip club.
Okay.
You probably have.
We definitely ventured over there to a couple strip clubs just to see what the hype was about.
Yeah, well, you got to see, you know.
Just got to see.
Gotta
just go over for a cup of coffee.
Yeah,
the
just
buffet.
like,
The buffets are great.
You just want to know what it's like, you know.
Oh yeah. So Nick lives in Vegas.
Nick lives in Vegas. It's funny. He's neighbors with Pauly Shore, which is super random. We were on set one day, and a shot got ruined because someone drove their Mini Cooper into the shot.
Oh my God.
What the fuck is that? Pauly Shore gets out. Everyone's like,
He's like,
what? Yeah, so there's a few people that relocated to Vegas and bought properties there.
Yeah.
I know that the tax situation is a lot better there than California.
You could get a mansion in Vegas.
Yeah.
I don't know
well,
what
if
it's
you're
like
Nick,
now.
You don't. I mean, if Nick, you can get anything you want.
You can get anything you want if you're him. You can get a massive home in Vegas compared to if you look at pricings compared to Toronto. It's insane.
Oh God, yeah. Ohio and Nevada, right? Yeah, but no. So he's lived there for about 17 years now. He said,
cool.
And he's loved it ever since. And I don't know how people do the heat there. And it's not as dry as it used to be. Like when I went as a kid in the summer, my family and I, we used to go, Lake Las Vegas, or we'd go to the Venetian. And I remember it being dry. Like, okay, it's hot, but it's dry. It was very muggy this summer. And we also got hit by a bunch of monsoons. I didn't know that it was like monsoon season. I didn't know there was a monsoon season in Vegas.
No, I didn't know that.
You start to remember that the desert, like a climate in the desert, is very, very intense. It can change on a dime. The nights can be freezing, in the winter. Days are really hot in the summer. And so we got rained out so many times. Like one of our sets flooded.
Oh, no.
And because you are using like generators and stuff to power things, if you even see a streak of lightning in the sky within, I think it's like 4 miles, you're shut down. You can't turn it on. You can't use power, nothing. And I think it was one Thursday we were there. I don't know if you guys saw the news this summer, but like Caesars had a flood.
Yes.
And Hollywood had leaks, like they had water coming out of the gambling screens, like at the sports betting center.
That's crazy.
And they said that Thursday there was more rainfall in that one day than any normal annual yearfall record they've had.
Holy shit.
In the city. Yeah.
So with a with a shoot like Bandit, where you pull off a very difficult mission. I mean, I don't know if I've ever. I don't know how many movies get routinely made in 5 weeks, let alone that many locations, let alone with the logistics of dealing with a new city last minute, basically. I'd have a lot of confidence in you that you could pull off anything.
Yeah, pretty much.
So,
Yeah.
my mother thinks so.
Yeah, for sure. But I think it's a hell of a testament to what you do and how well you can do it.
No, it's I never want to do it again. So just anyone who's listening, don't hire me to do that. No, it's trial by fire. You know what I mean? It's you learn something new about yourself. And the process. You know.
Yeah. Well, it's a honor to have you on Cast of Creators.
To be here.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you so much for joining us. Yeah. And I'm so excited for the 23rd to see people's reaction to the movie. I think they're going to absolutely
I hope they like it. I hope they enjoy it. Yeah.
And just a real pleasure. Thank you, Allan.
Oh, thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you. Thanks for tuning into this episode with Allan Ungar. Bandit comes out on September 23rd, and you can watch it in select theaters across Canada or rent it on your favorite streaming service.
You can follow Allan on Instagram at Allan_Ungar. That's UNGAR. Or check out his YouTube channel.
Find more episodes of our podcast at castofcreators.com, subscribe on YouTube, or listen on your favorite podcast platform.